Talking Cougars is brought to you by Safeway. Come see what's fresh.
What's up? This is Talking Cougars. I'm Michael Bumpus with my guy Alex Brink. Episode number 7, a bit different this time, man. We're coming off a bye week, man. We've had a lot of time to kind of sit, reflect, watch everybody else ball and see what they're up to. What you do during your bye week, B?
Boy, I watched the chaos that was college football, Bump. How about that? Vanderbilt beating Alabama, Washington beating Michigan, number 10 Michigan. Cougs sure look good at that Apple Cup win. Texas Tech, guess what their only loss is, Bump? To the Washington State Cougars. So felt like the bye week was good for the Cougs. You got to rest up a little bit. You got to, again, watch some of those teams lose and, kind of felt like you gained a little bit by some subtraction.
Yeah, man, the same thing. I love watching Vanderbilt take their goalpost 3 miles to the river. 3 miles they took that thing. I love hearing Alabama fans freak out on Kalen DeBoer. Relax. Everything's going to be fine over there. And then I actually went to watch UW against Michigan and watch that go down. So it was fun, man. It was fun to see these guys. But now it's our turn. We are locked back in this week. We're taking on Fresno State. And so because we've had time to reflect, I think it's given us time to kind of figure out who needs to step up and be a guy this week against Fresno State to kind of get the Cougs back on track, right? Because our goal before the bye week was, okay, 5-0, you'll make a run at the college football playoff. Let's see what happened. Ended with a loss. You lick your wounds. You get ready to go. And as I watched film on Fresno State, there's this kid, Magdalena. He is their best receiver, man. He has about 500 yards. He had a game against Sacramento State where he had 225 yards through the air. So naturally, that's what Fresno State is known for, right? Throwing the football. We know Pat McCann, who was the OC at Eastern Washington. Now he's the OC at Fresno State. We know what he likes to do. He wants to throw the football. So if I had to lock in on somebody to be the X factor this week, I'm going with a corner. I'm going with Hall, man. Can you match up with number 0 and just limit his production? There are other guys on that football team who can get it done. We're going to see some tight ends, some other receivers, but let's just go with the guy who catches the most footballs. Can you lock down the young Delano over there with Fresno State? He actually reminds me of Efton Chisholm a little bit, a guy that Pat McCain helped develop over there at Eastern Washington. So, yeah, man, my X factor, I'm going with Hall, man. Let's lock him down. Who you rolling with?
I'm going to keep the theme, man. It's defense for me. Look, Cougs are coming off a really tough defensive performance against Boise State. And frankly, over the course of the season, the defense has been the most inconsistent. They've had their moments, right? They've made some big stops, thinking Apple Cup. They've had some big turnovers, Texas Tech, but they have not been consistent. They're one of the worst tackling teams in the country. And they do a really poor job of getting pressure on the quarterback. And you already mentioned a buddy of ours, Pat McCann. Pat likes to throw the football, man. This is a throw-first offense. And he's learned from some great ones, right? He was with Jeff Tedford. He understands what, Kirby Moore did before, Kalen DeBoer and that staff, and Ryan Grubb, and like all the history of Fresno and throwing the football, the Carr brothers, right? Jake Hayner. I mean, Fresno State, that's what they do, right? They play great offense, and they typically have really solid receivers and a really good quarterback, and they got another one. Mikey Keene's a really nice player, transferred from UCF a couple years ago. He can play ball, and he can throw it. If you let him sit back and distribute the ball downfield, he's going to dice you up, Bump. And that's one thing UNLV did a nice job of, is they got after him at the point of attack, and that's the X factor for me for Washington State. Can the defensive line, very specifically Cyrus Webster, make an impact? We heard about Webster all offseason. Tons of talent, super athletic, crazy productive at Utah Tech, but it hasn't translated at Washington State quite yet. 10 tackles on the season, 1 pressure, no sacks so far. He's been close. He's been really close, but he's got to step up and make an impact. Andrew Edson's done a nice job so far this year. Ray M. Stevenson has had his moments, but I tell you what, to me, I think Cyrus Webster's got to be a key in this game. He's got to make Mikey Keene uncomfortable. Cougs have to get pressure rushing 4, not bring in extra players, because if they bring extra players, Bump, you know what happens when you play a good passing offense. You leave yourself open to some big plays.
Yeah, look at this offensive guys going with defensive guys for the X Factor, because we realize, man, you got to be able to get a couple of stops. And if you're able to do that, you should be fine. I love that you mentioned what UNLV did out to Fresno State. They had some guys on that defensive line and kind of made things a little muddy on that defensive line or offensive line for Fresno State. So, yeah, I like it. You start at the front with the D-line, and then we'll take care of it on the back end with the DBs and hopefully cause some turnovers, man. Get back to the takeaways, take that ball out the air, and just make life crazy for Fresno State. All right, man, we're just getting started here on Talking Cougars, episode number 7. When we come back, we'll take a deeper dive and look at Fresno State.
This segment is presented by Cougs First. Think Cougs First for products, services, and hiring. Back now on Talking Cougars, and we got to look at this week's opponent, the Fresno State Bulldogs. It's a talented football team. They've had their ups and downs. They've played some tough opponents. They opened at Michigan, a really tough game. Then they got 3 wins, Sac State, New Mexico State, and New Mexico. And then lost a brutal one to UNLV, a motivated UNLV team, Bump, who had a ton of press going into the week and then just came out guns blazing and beat up on the Bulldogs. And then, like Washington State, they have a bye week. And they're coming off that bye week trying to figure out who they are. What's the identity of this team? A veteran quarterback. They've got a solid defense, but lost a lot of really good football players. Kevin Coyle, the defensive coordinator, is a veteran. He's been an NFL coach. He's got a defensive background, so you know he's going to have a plan for that Washington State passing attack and what Ben Arbuckle's trying to bring. Obviously, they're going to have an answer for John Mateer and the way he runs the football. So I think this is a really intriguing matchup. And to hear Jake Dickert this week, he really thinks this is a big game. Let's hear what Coach had to say.
One of those things where you got to reset, you got to recharge. And then I told him last night, you got to refocus when you come back in the building. You know, I'd be probably lying if I didn't say we don't have a bad taste in our mouth and want to get back out there and show the team that we know that we can be.
Well, that was Jake Dickert, and obviously he knows how important this game is. He knows how talented and tough this Fresno State squad is. Bump, I know you spent a lot of time diving into the tape in the bye week and getting a feel, talking to Coach McCann. You know a lot of guys down there at Fresno. What do you see from this Bulldog team that is going to pose challenges for Washington State?
Yeah, well, let's start with the offense, man. Offensively, like you mentioned, they want to throw the football. They do a great job of pre-snap. They're going to move some guys around. They'll come out in your 10 personnel. They'll come out in your 11 and 12 personnel. There's always going to be some type of movement before the snap. And you know what that does for quarterbacks, right? It helps you guys identify what's going on with the defense. Are they in man? Are they in zone? They're going to bring in 2 tight ends, split one to the other side, split the other one, and then bring them back. They'll start with the running back in the backfield, move them to the slot, then bring them back behind the quarterback and try to make the defense have to shift and declare what they want to do. They'll be under center, but they'll work mostly from the shotgun position. Lots of switch routes as well. Inside receiver will switch with the outside receiver. And then I feel like there's some run and shooting this offense as well. I'm watching the film and I'm looking at receivers make decisions 12, 15 yards down the field, whether they are going to sit or not. Also, they do a lot of good things with the offensive line. Everyone's running RPOs these days, and not everyone, but a lot of teams are moving these guards in pass coverage to kind of influence those linebackers and make them bite up, knowing dang well they are not going to throw the football. So I kind of see a lot going on with this offense. I see a little bit of run and shoot. I see that McVay, Shanahan pre-snap movement type of stuff, and I see them wanting to throw the football down the field. You talked about their quarterback. He's great at finding these receivers sitting in the zone. So then when we go over to the defense, it's a pretty basic defense. I mean, what you see is what you get. You're going to play a lot of 2 high. I've seen an odd front with 3 down linemen. I've also seen an even with 4. They'll take that defensive lineman, drop him into the middle of the field as well, and keep a 2 high look. And they have some ballers over there. They have a DB over there that is leading the Mountain West in interceptions with 4. They have a young linebacker over there. This kid's young name. He's 5th in the league when it comes to tackles. They can get some things done. What I saw against UNLV, though, UNLV's quarterback rushed for 116 yards. So you already know what I'm thinking, B. Let Mateer do what he does, man. Start the game off like he did against the Broncos. Dial something up for him and let him get loose. They're not the greatest when it comes to tackling, but they're sound, man. Defensively, they'll be sound. Offensively, they're going to try to get you to move and try to confuse you and see how disciplined you are.
Well, and you mentioned the John Mateer, running game, and really the Washington State running attack in general struggled against the Boise State Broncos, right? It wasn't just Mateer. Mateer had a big one. He had, he did okay, but he took a lot of sacks, so the numbers didn't look as good. But really what I look at is Wayshawn Parker didn't get going really at all. Leo Pualasi didn't get going. And so, again, that running attack for Washington State kind of needs to come back to life a little bit, because it's not just Mateer. Really, the whole group had been really good. Now, we've heard during the bye week that there may be some changes on the offensive line, right? So you get Fa'alili Fa'amoy back off of injury in that Boise State game to play right tackle. But then the question mark was, what did you do with the veteran Christian Hilborn, right? He's playing right tackle. Do you move him to one of the guard spots, and where does he fit in? Sounds like he may fit in somewhere in the guard spot, like possibly with Rod Tialavea at the left guard position, maybe right guard. So they got to figure out that rotation Jake Dicker talked about at the offensive line position, and who is going to be your first five out there. Because, Bump, you know how that is, right? Like, running game is about consistency. It's about communication. And then it's the physicality after that. But they got to get things communicated. You got to have the same five guys out there. And then those running backs know where to hit the holes and know where to go.
Yeah, it's fun to hear that, like, we're talking about Washington State being like a physical type of team, running the football. And that really hasn't been the identity of this football team. But now with Mateer and all the running backs and the linemen that you mentioned, you have the option to do both. And I think Fresno State is kind of searching to be that as well. They have two running backs back there. One has about $140, one has 125, but they haven't had that explosive game. So if I am the Cougs, man, just gap integrity, wrap these guys up, make them one-dimensional, because we all know when you can do that, you make the game plan a lot easier for your defensive coordinator.
Well, you mentioned something that might scare some Coug fans. That's gap integrity and wrapping people up. But tackling has not been a strength of the Washington State defense so far. But you're right. If they take care of business, Fresno State could be pretty one-dimensional in the running game and lead to a team that just wants to drop back and pass, which you and I both know that's a team that you can get after if you know they're going to throw the football. And we'll find out a little bit more about this Fresno State team from one of the insiders when we come back, the analyst for the Fresno State Bulldogs, Cam Warell. This segment is brought to you by Cougar Collective. Back now on Talkin' Cougars, and I'm super excited to be joined by a good friend of mine and a former Fresno State Bulldog player, 2001, 2002, Cam Warell, who is also now the analyst for the Bulldogs on their radio broadcast, much like me. So he's got the inside scoop on what this team is like, what they're feeling. And Cam, man, coming off a bye week similar to the Cougs, a tough game the week before against UNLV. Give me the vibes around this Fresno State team, which had tough start to the season going out to Michigan, then obviously that UNLV game. What's it feel like around the locker room and around the facility?
Yeah, I mean, it probably feels like it feels around the Washington State program. Anytime you lose like Fresno did and Washington State did, you just want to get back on the field and wash that taste out of your mouth. Unfortunately for them, they had to sit around for an extra week because they were on a bye. But, I think they did a good job of watching the tape, making corrections, and then just kind of burying it and moving on, right? It's over. It was what it was. Let's make the corrections that we need to make and prepare for a really, really good offense that Washington State will bring to town.
Talk a little bit about Coach Skipper. His brother, Kelly, coached Bump and I at Washington State. So obviously a football family, like you said, a legacy guy, played at Fresno, has coached there prior to this. That transition from Coach Tedford, a legend, right, in not only Fresno State, but college football in general, to Tim Skipper and what looks like, again, a lot of, legacy staff members and people that understand. What's that transition been like, both from the offseason and then into the early part of this season?
Yeah, Coach Tedford stepped away for the bowl game last year, and Skip hopped right in, and they beat a really good New Mexico State team. The smartest player I've ever played with, outside of Zach Thomas, who's a Pro Football Hall of Famer, was Tim Skipper. I mean, it's just in his blood, that the coaching bloodlines he has, his father, his brother, his brother, longtime NFL coach, dad as well. And now, he's been everywhere. He's been in the Mountain West. He's been in the SEC. He's been an assistant. He's been a coordinator, but he really understands what Bulldog football is all about. And when guys come here, a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball were recruited by Skip, and everybody really just loves the energy, loves the attitude, loves the physical, mental approach that they take every Saturday. And the program's in a good spot. There are rules. You have to go through a process after the season, but I would be really shocked if Tim Skipper's not named the full-time head coach after the 2024 season.
Well, and as you'd expect, Fresno State's got an explosive offense and, a trigger man in Mikey Keene that can really do it. And the receiver position is deep and has playmakers. Thinking about that offense, what makes it so special, and what are the keys to making it be productive?
Yeah, and when Mikey Keene is protected, you could probably say that about most quarterbacks. Although, it's here, he can whether he's protected or not, he's making plays. So, but Mikey Keene, he doesn't have that same kind of off-platform capability. He really does need a clean pocket. He needs to be able to step up and allow his receivers to create space in the passing game. If he gets a clean pocket, he can light people up. He's extremely accurate. He can make all the throws. The deep ball, maybe not his biggest strength, but anything outside the numbers all the way down the football field, he's a really, really accurate thrower of the football in those areas. When he's sped up, just like most quarterbacks, he gets rid of it a little bit too quickly. He doesn't fully assess the picture that he's seeing, and he can make some mistakes. Obviously, if you run the football, it helps alleviate some of that pressure. 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12. If Washington State gets Fresno State in those down and distances, that's where Mikey Keene and this offensive line really struggle. So it's paramount for them, whether it's quick game, whether it's RPO, or just traditional running the football. They do have to stay out of those obvious passing situations. They've really struggled with that kind of down and distance so far this year.
And it's going to be quite the chess match. Two teams coming off tough losses and coming off bye weeks, man. Those coaches have been grinding on the film, and I'm fired up, man. It's a matchup of future conference opponents, which is pretty cool. I don't know how you feel about that. It's exciting about some of the opportunities and some of the things coming for the new Pac-12.
Yeah, Fresno State and the Pac-12, they've never been associated with one another, and as a former Bulldogs, I played in the WAC, then we were in the Mountain West, and all this college football upheaval, you don't really know where Fresno State fits. And the night I started getting text messages like, hey, is this real? Is Fresno State really going to the Pac-12? And I hit some people up and I was like, yeah, it really is. I think it's going to be the best conference on the West Coast, obviously. But this is one of those conferences with the quality of football programs that are in it that, can start to challenge to get back in that Power 5 conversation. Traditionally, recently, all of these programs are really, really strong. They've invested the right way, and I'm so excited for the future of the Pac-12 to see how they continue to grow, and then just to create some new rivalries, man. Fresno State, Washington State. We played Oregon State a couple of times when I was here. Those are physical football games. They're tough. You recruit the same type of players, so it's an exciting time for Fresno State. It's an exciting time for all the members of the new Pac-12, and couldn't be more excited to see the Cougars come to town and take on the Bulldogs at Valley Children's Stadium. And this is kind of the start of some new traditions, so it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. I'm excited to get down there and catch up in person a little bit more. Thanks for joining Talking Cougars. We sure appreciate it. We'll be back after the break to talk more about this Fresno State and Washington State matchup. This segment is brought to you by Flat Stick Pub, local craft beer, mini golf, and old school fun.
All right, welcome back to Talking Cougars. I'm Michael Bumpus with my quarterback, Alex Brink. It's time for some bold predictions. How are things going to go down? And let's start off with our quarterback. True or false, B? Mateer will lead all quarterbacks in total touchdowns scored, produced, accounted for. Right now, he's got 18 of them things. What do you think?
18 through 5 games, that's good for third in the country among FBS quarterbacks. Bump, I think this is true, man, and it's not hyperbole that John Mateer can do some special things on the football field. We've seen his explosive nature running the ball. He can definitely throw it. He probably should have, 5 more touchdowns? He's missed some downfield throws that we've seen against Boise. He had some opportunities. So he's even got a little meat on that bone so far through these 5 games. And look, we talked about it a little bit with Fresno State. They struggled with a running quarterback against UNLV. You look ahead to teams like Hawaii. They're playing good defense, but Utah State's struggling, 128th in the country in total defense. San Diego State's struggling. They're in the lower third of defenses in the country. So he's got 4 games just on the horizon where he's got a chance to really make a move and do some special things. Now, again, a young player, he's got to figure out, coming off a tough game against Boise, how to handle that. But the bye week, I think, helped. I think this is true, Bump. I think John Mateer will lead all FBS quarterbacks in total touchdowns at the end of the year for sure. On the defensive side, I have a question for you, because I talked about it at the start of this show that I think the defensive line needs to step up. And in that case, there's some guys. We've talked about some guys, Quinn Roth, Ray Stevenson, Cyrus Webster, on and on. There's guys on that defensive line that can make some plays. So my question for you is, a team that's got 5 sacks on the year so far defensively, who's going to end up leading the Cougs in sacks by the end of the season?
Man, that blew my mind when I saw that stat beat, that they only have 5 sacks on the season. Just doesn't feel right with a Dicker defense. But they got time to make that up and really get going. And I got to go with Edson, man. Every time I talk to the coaches about Andrew Edson, they talk about how you can move him anywhere. You go inside if you want him to, outside if you want him to. The more versatility, the better. He's got 2 of the 5, so he's already leading the charge. But I got to go with him, because every time I watch him play, there's a motor in him that the great sackers in college football just naturally have. You know, that motor that our guy M.K. Bruce had back in the day when he was an All-American getting after the quarterback. You got to have that, and then you got to have that technique and that leverage and that pure strength. And when I watch him play, I see it in him. He has that twinkle in his eye, that little crazy twitch that some defensive linemen have. You know what I'm saying? We're on the offensive side. We got to be a bit more composed. I see it in him, though, so I'm going with Edson, man. Steady Eddie is what Coach told me they call him. So I'm gonna go with Steady Eddie, man. Let's look at this season. And we're 4-1 right now. Coming off a bye week. Wanted to be 5-0, but you know what? We're not worried about that. Like, what's the potential of this team? Could we see the Cougs win 10, 11 games this year?
Look, Bump, I think it's time for some good vibes around here, right? That Boise State trip left a little bit of a sour taste in our mouth. I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, this is a 11-win football team, in my opinion, if they come off this bye week with the right mentality and right attitude. Fresno in the Valley is a tough game, no doubt. If you win this game, you're off and running, right? You start looking at Hawaii for homecoming, down at San Diego State, a team that's struggling under a new first-year coach. You go into some warm weather, a bunch of guys that are from the Southern California area. You know how motivated athletes get when they go from the Palouse back down to Cali, right? You were one of those guys. And then looking out the rest of the season, you got a tough matchup at Oregon State. But look, what if both of those teams, right, are at 1 loss going into that game? Think about the excitement for the Pac-2 championship you're going to have. I think this team really, as hard as the Boise game was, it's a good football team, right? I talked about it at the beginning. They beat a Washington team that just beat the number 10 team in the country. They beat a Texas Tech team that has not lost since that game. So I think the Cougs have a chance to do some special things. What say you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it's important that you pointed those things out, right? Texas Tech only lost once. You beat UW, who beat Michigan, and you lost to a Broncos team that's going to be pushing to make the college football playoff, no doubt about it, with a Heisman Trophy candidate over there. And I think it's important that people realize that and that this team realize that. And I'm the same. I'm looking at the schedule. Respect everybody, right? You don't look past anybody, especially if you're a player. But we're analysts, and we're allowed to look forward and try to project and see what's going down. And I see no reason for them not to. Now, you have to get lucky in football at times. You got to stay healthy. You have to get better every single week at something, right? My coach Levy used to say, look, as long as you're taking steps in the right direction every single day, every single week, you're going to be good when it's all said and done. And I think that's important that these guys do that. They understand that. I'm with it 100%, man. You win this game, because this is going to be the toughest test, I think, until you get to that Oregon State game. Still got to play everybody else, but this should be the toughest test. If you get this game right here, man, no doubt about it, man. We're going to be celebrating double-digit wins when it comes to the Cougs this year. I'm excited for it. One step at a time, though. But, we're analysts. This is what we do. We project.
That's what we do. Slim chance, Bump, of a college football playoff with the 12-team expansion. That's why they did it, man. Everybody's excited, right? Like Alabama lost to Vanderbilt, and they still are feeling like, well, we're going to get into the college football playoff, right? So we'll see how that goes as the season unfolds. But it's going to be a fun one no matter what. Excited to look ahead some more and chat with our guy, Chris King, coming back on, my broadcast partner, the voice of the Cougs, to talk a little bit about where Washington State is at in this point in the season. This segment is brought to you by Valley GMC. See you in the Valley. Back on Talkin' Cougars, I'm joined by my broadcast partner, the voice of the Cougs, Chris King. Chris, it's your second appearance on Talkin' Cougars, which I feel like you should be really honored to join Bump and I 2 times in this season, man.
Yeah, I'm flattered I'm not one and done. It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we're fired up, and we had to have you because you get the chance to see the team in person throughout the week, living in Pullman and being there. You get great access to the team, and coming off that tough loss at Boise, then the bye week, there's been a lot happening with the team so far in the last, 10 days, 2 weeks. So I would love to get your thoughts on, what you've seen at practice, kind of what the vibe is around the team, like I said, coming off the tough loss and having to regroup.
It's been fun seeing the guys get back to work. And Alex, you and I were there in Boise, and that's still after the first play of the fourth quarter. That was a 7-point game. So the final score doesn't reflect necessarily how within range it was deep into that game. But credit to Ashton Genty. No one has been able to stop him so far. And the Cougs had certainly struggled with that. So the bye seemed to come at a good time as far as getting guys back as healthy as possible. So, the guys who were expected to see back, that it's been a while, Carlos Hernandez, ready to make his season debut, Jamari Colson, at the running back position, a tough break. Dylan Payne was really critical late in that double overtime win over San Jose State. He's been in the program a number of years, but suffered a season-ending injury. But the Cougs will get back Javinsky Schlembaker. So having all those guys ready to go, that's really exciting for the team. I think it's really exciting. I just think the big thing is guys are, they're pumped to be back out on the field. Another chance to prove themselves coming up here soon against Fresno State.
You mentioned the bye week coming. Really feels like at a great time. Talking about getting Javinsky Schlembaker back, that the run game for Washington State wasn't quite there against the Broncos as we had become accustomed to in the first 4 games. Do you think getting Schlembaker back gives some of that physicality to the run game that can hopefully get it kickstarted again?
Yeah, that seems like it will really help. And I think the team too, that was a tough game against Boise State, but we have seen so much success offensively and just how many different weapons the Cougs have and different ways that the Cougs offensively can make life tough for opposing teams, that Schlembaker being part of that, as you mentioned, his physicality is so good as a north to south runner, especially in those short yardage situations. So still Wayshawn Parker at the running back position, he has shown the most flashes. So if we could see Wayshawn Parker have a bounce back game after he was quieter against Boise State, and the offense as a whole had a hard time getting in rhythm and being added in with Leo Pulalasi. And then of course we know what John Mateer can do with his legs to get back more to that, just because, Alex, as we just saw it in so many different ways in the wins over Portland State, and going through Texas Tech and into the Apple Cup, and then from there the San Jose State victory. And while that one was tighter than the Cougs would have liked, the offense did their job in that game, putting up over 50 points and coming away with the win. So an interesting opportunity here.
No doubt. Thinking about John Mateer, you mentioned the importance of obviously getting him back on track, running the football, and he was productive for sure against Boise State, but had a few hiccups along the way. Felt like maybe things came back to earth a little bit for the young quarterback. What have you seen from him this week during both this week of prep and the bye week as he kind of tries to bounce back from that first loss of the season?
One thing you hear consistently from Jake Dickert about John Mateer is he's one of the first guys in the building. He's back ready to go. He loves to compete. So I think, he, as much as anyone, is excited to correct the mistakes and to learn from the Boise State loss and how to get better from that. And, a lot has been put on his shoulders, and he has answered the call for the Cougs, as we have seen in some of those big situations, especially those tightest games against UW in the Apple Cup and against San Jose State. But this is an offense with a lot of playmakers, and we know what Kyle Williams can do. We've seen what Chris Hudson has brought to the team. Now you throw Carlos Hernandez back into the mix where, one of the phrases that Jake Dickert has used about John Mateer is he doesn't have to be Superman. And while we've seen him do a great Superman impersonation at times where it makes the life a lot easier if you need to lean on his legs, when you can get the ball out in space to your playmakers and let them use their magic. So I'm excited to see, just as the offense as a whole, how it will respond in this game against Fresno State.
You talked about the road environment. It's going to be a wild one in the Valley. There's no doubt about it. I'm excited to get down there, excited to see you, get in that booth, and call this one. It's going to be a big one. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll be back on Talkin' Cougars. Back here on Talkin' Cougars is Brink and Bump, man. Number 10 and number 5. This has been a fun one, Bump. I got to go back to what we were talking about with that bye week. You and I got to sit on the couch a little bit, enjoy some time, and watch the AP Top 25 crumble in front of our eyes, man. It was a wild weekend of football. And now you kind of look at how things shook out and what happened. Alabama obviously drops, brutal loss to Vanderbilt. Texas ends up as number 1, undefeated. They got a huge matchup in the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma this week. And then the big one, the one I'm watching personally, a top 3 matchup at Autzen Stadium in Eugene between Oregon and Ohio State. Man, that is going to be a heavyweight battle.
Man, they haven't hosted a top 5 matchup. Now they're hosting a top 3 matchup. The O's going at it, man. You got Oregon and Ohio State. I think that's going to be a great one. Game day there, I mean, we've experienced game day, right? Game day in Pullman. Guys are going to be up early, tailgating, getting it done. I'm excited for that one, man. I think that with Bama losing just makes everyone else human. We already saw Bama take down Georgia, then Bama losing to Vanderbilt. Makes everyone human, and I love this. So with this top 3 matchup, we're going to see someone else become human. We're going to see either Ohio State or Oregon do that. Something that surprised me about the AP Top 10, I go, why is Michigan still top 25? Excuse me, yeah, top 25. I mean, they're 4-2. They got 2 losses. Is there nobody else you can put in front of them? I guess not, man. I was completely surprised by that.
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes some of those things are a little surprising. Boise State, mind you, jumped up to, I think, around 17, so they're making a move up that top 25 for sure. LSU Ole Miss is the other big one on the weekend. It's a great Saturday of college football. There's a lot happening. Cougs are going to be a part of it with Fresno State. I think it's an interesting bump when you talk about Vanderbilt beating Alabama, some of the wins and losses that have happened that are atypical, in my opinion, to what we've seen in the past. And I wonder, in your opinion, does transfer portal, NIL, does it actually even the playing field, right? Is Alabama unable to hoard all the best players now and keep them off to the sideline because those athletes can now spread out across the country, let's say, get paid somewhere, whatever, go be starters, and now there's more parity in college football? Because to me, feels like there's a little bit of that through the first 5 weeks.
Yeah, it's weird, man, because why were guys going to Alabama or in Georgia, in Ohio State, with the promise to compete for a national championship and hopefully get to the NFL and make some money? Now, what's the promise now? You can go to college and get paid and still make it to the NFL. So I think priorities have shifted a little bit. When you got teams like SMU who can put out some money, Texas A&M. If you are a university in Texas, you are automatically in the mix because we all know about the oil money down there and how they can just throw dollars at these kids. I think it's evening it out a bit more than it has in the past. But when it's all said and done, there are about 5 or 6 schools that are automatically going to attract these top tier type of players. And I think the alums from those schools also understand that if you want to keep the prestige of your program, you have to kick in and pay these guys as well. Some people hate it, some people love it. I'm all for kids getting paid and making their money because NCAA made a lot of number 10 and number 5 jerseys back in the day, Brink, and that wasn't an accident. So they go ahead and get their money.
Yeah, it's true. I really like the comments from Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise this week. He was talking about heading into the game, leaving for NIL, taking more money, ends up staying at Boise, right? And he said that he can't really trade anything for legacy, right? And he felt like his legacy was at Boise. He knows the NFL is his future, so chasing NIL money didn't really make sense. I thought that was a really mature statement from his standpoint. He knows he's in a good place, and then he's going to build his legacy there and then go make his money in the NFL, right?
Yeah, that's Jeanty is gonna be a dying breed because we know what money does, man. It changes people. So to hear that from him has been refreshing. And he's probably gonna win the Heisman. This guy is playing at a different level. There was only one player that I would get up and watch when we played against them, and he was on the offensive side of the ball, and that was his Reggie Bush. I want to be like, all right, what is Reggie gonna do? I'm trying to keep up with him, could never keep up with him, but what is Reggie gonna do? And Jeanty is that type of guy. So let's shift over to the Heisman talk real quick. Travis Hunter has to be in the mix as well. Of course he's in the mix. He's the only guy I've seen in the last 10 years play both sides of the football and not get tired. He does not seem tired. And he's making plays. He's not just out there, right? You know who the last person I saw do that? Jed Collins, man. Remember, we played offense, defense, and special teams our freshman year. Then he kind of settled on tight end. But Travis Hunter, it's impressive to watch him work on offense and defense and make plays, not just be a guy out there.
It kind of feels like Ashton Jeanty in the field. You know what I mean, man? Like,
yeah.
Travis Hunter is special. It's probably going to come down to how Colorado finishes, the rest of the season, because you and I both know it's not really the best player in college football usually. It's usually one of the best players on the best team,
right,
or the best player on a team that wins the most, right? So Boise has a chance to maybe be a one-loss team, and Ashton Jeanty's so special, right? If he breaks Barry Sanders' rushing record, you got to give it to him. Same thing for Travis Hunter, right? If they end up winning a ton of games at Colorado this year, and he's the straw that stirs the drink on offense and defense, then he's definitely going to be in the mix. I mean, both those guys are going to be in New York. I think they're both going to be up for it and have a realistic shot. But boy, Jeanty feels like an unstoppable force at this time.
Yeah, I think it's his trophy to lose for sure. And I'm going to throw in Cam Moore. I think he'll have a seat in New York. I don't think people will expect him to win that thing, but just being there is an honor in itself. So there are some options, but I'm with you, man. Travis Hunter and then Jeanty is his trophy to lose, and it's refreshing hearing his comments about his legacy and going back to Boise State. All right, when we come back, man, we'll put a bow on this thing and tell you what the Cougs need to do to get this victory on Saturday.
Back for our final segment on Talkin' Cougars, and we got a cool announcement this week, Bump. We found out that next year, 2025, Washington State's going to go to the Grove and play the Ole Miss Rebels. That's going to be a fun game. I don't even know what to think. I mean, it's probably going to be obviously a tough matchup, SEC country, but you and I got to play at a cool place at Auburn and thought that was the best experience that I ever had on a road football game. We didn't win, but it was a really cool experience. I got to imagine the Coug fans are going to travel for that one. That's going to be sweet.
Man, you got to show up to this. When we went to Alabama in 2007, they stuck our fans in a corner way up top in the stadium, and they were getting rowdy, man. You got to take opportunities like this and travel. I mean, we were fortunate enough. We went to Wisconsin as well. That was a great experience. But when you get a chance to go down south and see and feel the passion from those fans down there, it's just different. Mississippi, the state of Mississippi has nothing but college sports. So everybody's going to show up to support these guys. You got Lane Kiffin, who knows what West Coast football is about when he was at USC back in the day with Pete Carroll. I love this. I saw this on my on my X feed and then thought it was a typo or something. I go, really? We're going down south. I love that, man. So, yeah, you should be excited about it. Don't know what the game is going to look like because as we were talking off air, with all the change that goes on with a team from year to year, you really don't know what your team is going to look like unless you have a big collective that's locking these dudes down. So it should be fun, man. The Cougs, if you are capable of getting down there, I promise you, you will not regret it. My dad lives in Mississippi, so I'm sure he's going to go check it out too.
Yeah, that'll be sweet, man. It's gonna be a cool one. The Cougs still got to fill out the rest of that 2025 schedule, but it's nice to get a little clarity from that standpoint. Well, we got to look ahead a little bit, Bump, to Saturday. Fresno State, it's a big point in the season. Team took care of the first third that you and I have been talking about. The first 5 games, it went 4-1, right? That was great. You go on a bye week. Now you got to come back. You got to take advantage of this next third, right? The next 3 games. And it starts with Fresno State. What's it going to take for the Cougs to win this football game?
You can't allow Fresno State to be explosive in the run game. That's something that they haven't been. They're going to try. They're going to keep trying every single week. I believe one of their running backs has a game of over 100 yards. Other than that, they're 50 yards, 60 yards, 70 yards. You cannot let them be explosive on the ground game because what that does is going to open everything else up. So everything that I mentioned during the first or second block when we talked about the pre-snap motions, the shifts and all that, is going to make it even more difficult to defend if you're not sure whether it's going to be a run or pass, or if you have to respect the run as much as you do the pass. So, man, make them throw the football. I mean, that's what they want to do, so let's prepare for that. Of course, respect the run. You never know. I mean, we learned that lesson with San Jose State. San Jose State was averaging 58 on the ground, and they had themselves a day. So, yeah, man, it's going to take you making Fresno State be exactly who they are and then attacking their offense in a way that just wears them down. Because like I mentioned, we saw UNLV, their quarterback, rush for over 100 yards. So you just play your game and make them play theirs, and I like our chances.
It's a little bit like that UW game plan, right? Where you tried your best to limit Jonah Coleman and put the ball in the hands of Will Rogers. And, they made some plays downfield, but they didn't have enough juice. And I think you're right. It's very similar, right? Make Fresno State one-dimensional, and then you know what you need to focus on. We haven't mentioned it yet, but you get one of your DBs back, Jamori Colson, who had an interception in the Apple Cup last year. You get him back in the defensive secondary if you need it, right? Ethan O'Connor's been playing well. Stephen Hall's been playing well, but you get some reinforcements coming back. So I think that's a positive. For me, it's, again, finding that running game. I mentioned how against Boise, it wasn't nearly as effective. John Mateer had a couple big runs, had the big one right off the bat on that first series, but you didn't see the typical Wayshawn Parker big hitter, right? You didn't see Leo Puolasi get going. We found out Dylan Payne tore his ACL in that Boise State game, so he's out for the season, which is too bad. Really good player, had a great game against San Jose State, but you get Javinsky Schlenmaker back off of injury, so you get that full stable of running backs. Let's get that running game going to get the Cougs the win down in the Valley.
And you get Hernandez. We haven't seen him yet, right? You get a receiver, another weapon. So you're getting healthy. You're losing maybe a guy or two, but you are getting healthy. And, man, this is the start. This is the start. You take care of Fresno. It is looking good, man. Well, that's Talking Cougars. I'm Michael Bumpus. You can find me on X, Michael Bumpus5, on Instagram, Michael Bumpus5. This weekend, I'm on NFL duties Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 on Seattle Sports. You got the Bump and Stacy show. I'm trying to stay busy. I got 3 kids. Where can they find you, Brink?
Man, you can find me on X at AlexSpring10. Hit us up. Send us some questions. Bump and I would love to answer some questions on Talking Cougars from all of the fans out there. You can also hear me on the call this weekend with Chris King, the voice of the Cougs, Jessamine McIntyre, our sideline analyst. I'm making the trip down to the Valley on Friday. It's going to be a fun one. Might be kind of hot down there in Northern California. We're looking forward to it. Thanks for tuning in to Talking Cougars. We'll see you all next week.